Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm so thrilled to be chatting with Duck's co-creators and husband and wife, Nathaniel Foster and Lia Kim. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks for having
Hi.
us.
I'm so excited. This is my first ever, as I was telling you, my first double interview, so I'm really excited to chat with both of you, get to know you guys better. So to start, I'd love to hear how you two met.
Yeah. So uh, Leah was a student at Art Center, and at the time, I was working.
No, I was freshly graduated.
Yeah, freshly graduated from Art Center in Pasadena, and we met through a mutual friend and went on a hike. And so like our first kind of date was like during the like middle of the pandemic, and we decided we were going to do an outdoor activity. And
That was the only option, actually.
that was, yeah,
Yeah.
because we couldn't go anywhere and most restaurants were still closed. And so we went on a local hike in the Pasadena area to an overlook. And that's kind of how we, really first got to know each other. And
And our
you were
first,
still recovering from
my injury.
yeah, so she had she had ruptured her Achilles tendon. And so it was like kind of like an interesting hike because like steep sections she couldn't do. So we kind of like had to help her up. But then like for the rest of it, she was fine.
Right.
But it was like a fascinating time to try and date because the options were very limited.
And our first meal was like in a park,
Yeah. Well,
like a picnic style.
she was under the impression that it was that, so like in my opinion, like a first date was just the hike, and then but her opinion was the hike and a meal. But I
Right.
asked her if she wanted to grab breakfast after the hike, and so I saw it and said, well, this is our second date, but she said no, this is just the continuation of day one. So the record is still out whether it was one or two dates.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so sweet. Honestly, yeah, like during the pandemic, that's tough. So, but that's so sweet. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was a time of there was an interesting time for love.
Hmm.
But I honestly liked it that way more because, I like outdoor activities and, you learn about the person way more when you do stuff and talk about stuff.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time in parks, just like having picnics and like doing outdoor activities, and because you just couldn't do anything inside. So I think it created an actual really nice environment for our relationship to kind of blossom.
Oh, that's really beautiful. And so I'd love to hear, so for you, Leah, specifically growing up, I'd love to hear about living in South Korea and like how that influenced your art style as well.
So I grew up in Korea. I was born and grew up in Korea, and I came to the state around the age of 21 or 20. So I was already like out of high school and um so I think as I'm doing more art, like that sense of Korean style comes out, which I would say like Korean beauty sometimes has some blank space. I think I kind of applied it into my art style. I don't know how to explain properly, but did you observe when
So like when I
I
visited
was
her parents in
uh,
Korea, it was there's like part of the Korean aesthetic is they don't have large houses there. A lot of people live in apartments. So there's sort of like a very efficient use of space. And within that, like the sort of like they have very grand architecture and very rich artwork. But it's also like some of it can be like very like simplified design wise, and it kind of creates these very intricate and elegant designs, but it uses space in an interesting way. So I think what Leah is trying to say, and what I observe in her work, is very much that she, in her Ducks comics, she likes to incorporate both design and a sort of simple Korean aesthetic, which kind of creates a very sort of weirdly familiar style for a newspaper like comic, but also something that kind of feels very fresh and unique to her.
And also, I think what I'm trying to say is like when you see the traditional Korean painting, like the art is not just focused on the subject itself, but the whole thing, like blank space, takes a big place into the art. And I do like leaving some space in blank on purpose to create sense of wide, like spread out, like aesthetic.
Yeah, creating like environments.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, totally. I really like that. That's really interesting hearing all of that. I know because the ducks are so adorable. We'll get into that, of course. I'd love to hear from you, Nathaniel, specifically. So I understand you have a BFA from the University of Southern California. So did you go to school for writing? I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
So it's kind of a funny, like my journey is a little bit unorthodox. So I
Hmm.
grew up in central Montana in like a town of 6,000 people. And weirdly enough, I got introduced to dance in central Montana. And that dance kind of introduced me to ballet in Missoula, Montana. And so I would take buses back and forth, like from central Montana to Missoula. And when I was studying ballet, I was attending the University of Montana in Missoula for my first year of college. And one of the things that they told me was like, well, why don't you take an acting class? And so I took an acting class. And during the summer, there was like a theater program, a workshop in New York. And they were offering scholarships to people to come out and learn playwriting and learn theater acting. And so I wrote this like very bizarre monologue and submitted it to this program, and they accepted me, and I went to New York, and I spent a year in New York, and then I applied to USC for acting. But when I was there, I kind of fell in love with writing. I spent a lot of time riding around on like the public transit system and watching people and observing the sort of, and I think that that is the thing about New York City that is like really wonderful, is not necessarily like the beauty of the city, because New York is a sort of grimy place, but it has like those like little moments of like, you know, real like human like interactions, and you everyone's lives are on display. You can't really hide in a place like New York, you know, because everything's so condensed. And so I spent a lot of time observing people, and I wrote about my observations and on trains and stuff like that. And then I got into USC and I studied acting. And throughout USC, I just kept writing, and it just kind of developed. But the comic thing didn't start until after college. I was mostly focused on screenwriting and playwriting. And I think I started getting into comics when I started realizing that there was a sort of lack of creative opportunity for screenwriters. And so I started taking some of my ideas from that I had for screenwriting and incorporating them into comics writing. And then this was sort of born from that, Duck, Stan, and Dave. It's a long, like roundabout story, but it all kind of like starts way back in Montana and just sort of taking a chance and, you know, opening doors open, and you try things and you walk through them, and it just kind of leads you to the next thing. It's really rather bizarre, but kind of fun at the same time.
I always love stuff like that, like kind of when you're on this journey, but then like it leads to other things that you didn't even expect. So that's really fascinating.
Yeah, I think my whole life has kind of been that, and it
Hmm.
even leading to Leah, and like I had, you know, like marrying Leah was like very fascinating because like I had never been introduced to Korean culture. I'd never traveled to an Asian country before, and so like going to these places were fascinating to me, and like it really opened my eyes to like everything that I think I didn't know in a weird sort of way.
And it was actually fascinating for me to go to Montana as well because I I never experienced something like that. And what's normal for them, for me, it was very exciting and new to me.
Yeah,
So
and the opposite for me, you know. So yeah.
yeah, I think we get a lot of inspiration from like traveling to each other's hometowns.
Yeah, and each other's cultural backgrounds and things like that. All of that stuff definitely makes its way into the work that we're trying to do.
That's really cool. I know experiencing each other's cultures. I imagine like even like the food and just like everyday things, all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
Yep.
that's wonderful. So for you, Leah, when did you decide? So like you came to the US for school specifically, was it, I understand the Art Center College of Design. So
Mhm.
then what was your goal? Did you want to like in terms of like pursuing art as your career?
So I think at the beginning I was interested in like a graphic design, but when I went to the school, I studied illustration, and I learned like a traditional style, like drawing, painting, all that stuff. And then I was never introduced to comics actually. And I never thought of doing comics, but even after graduation, I was just doing I would make a piece, one piece, tell the whole story, kind of an illustration.
Mm.
I never thought of doing like multiple panels telling a
Yeah,
story.
sequential storytelling.
Right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And Nathaniel one day, like, suggested me, "Do you want to make comics together?" And at first, I was like, "I don't do comics.
Yeah.
I don't know how to make it, or I never thought of it." And so at first, my answer was no.
Mm.
And he had to convince me multiple times, and he would bring multiple different stories, and there was multiple no's. And then finally, after our honeymoon in England, we had this he suggested ideas of dogs, and then mm, I mean, I like drawing animals. I think I always, as an artist, I always like drawing animals. So that was something that opened up my heart. And I said yes to this one, and we're starting to making
Yeah.
it.
So beautiful. Yeah, so tell me how the initial idea came about for these two ducks, Dan and Dave.
So,
Yeah.
funnily enough, we were
Mm,
gonna do the wedding. We were gonna do our wedding in Korea,
right.
and we were gonna do a sort of mixed traditional elements and modern elements of like Western weddings. And ultimately, we couldn't do it because of the pandemic, and so no one could fly over there unless you were gonna stay for a month. So we decided we were going to do like a very small, intimate family wedding so that our families could get to know each other because they had not really met beyond just a phone call. And so we decided we were going to do it where sort of some of my ancestry comes, which is the sort of English and European Jewish ancestry. So we decided to go to England and do a small wedding in England. And so we rented out this large countryside like cottage place, and we had like everyone staying in the same house. And after we had stayed there, we went to London for our honeymoon. Everyone sort of broke off, and in London, we spent a lot of time. Like London is a very sort of walkable city, and it's a very beautiful city, and they've got these really old, pretty parks. And one of the parks we were in, we were sort of fascinated because there were ducks and swans and
Oh,
geese everywhere. And these particular ducks were just sort of anthropomorphic in their behaviors and their attitudes towards other people. It was more like, as Leah likes to put it, like it's like everyone was in their house. And so they were acting casually. And so you'd have like mothers pushing strollers, and then like the ducks would be leading their little
geez.
kids
Mm.
right next to them or like walking almost between
Right.
people's legs. That's how like
Oh,
symbiotic the Londoners were with these ducks.
Yeah, we had to go around them.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
they
wow.
did whatever they wanted. It was
right.
their
They're
place, and they were
not
so comfortable around people.
right. They were not
Interesting.
scared of people at all.
And so I think like when
Hmm.
I started pitching Lee ideas and she started knocking them down, like the one that sort of stuck was like, what if we just kind of did something about those like London ducks? Like, what if we came up with these ducks and they had like real human problems and they would observe human beings in their element and like try and interpret them and, just deal with life's problems on a sort of daily basis at this pond, and, how and sort of explore that intersection of people and ducks.
That's so interesting. Again, like with a different culture. So the ducks just like hanging out with the people in the park. Do people feed them and stuff too?
Yeah, yeah. Like
Mm.
it like you can feed them, or they'll just walk
Mm.
up to you, and like they'll half the time they'll like look at you and be like, pay your rent kind of a thing for walking through the park.
Interesting.
So it's if you have a chance to go to London, I don't know if you've been, but if you do, go to like next to the Queen's Palace and or the now King's Palace, and walk through the park, and you can kind of see all those ducks, and they're just a riot just watching them interact with each other.
Right.
That's really cool. So then from there, Dan and Dave were born. So then I understand you guys had a Kickstarter for this project. So how did that come about, specifically about taking it to the next level in terms of getting like a book published?
So I think the first thing was that we wanted to do a small collection of strips to sort of
Mm.
jumpstart the process of making them. And I think the goal is ultimately to like, get the comic syndicated, and like get it into newspapers countrywide and just have like dailies and Sundays. And the book is mostly a collection of what are called Sunday comic strips, which would be released on weekends with like the newspaper. And like I grew up in a place, in rural Montana, we didn't have many comic books available. Like there were, some Bone comics, there were some, a second volume of, a Captain America story, but you wouldn't have the first and you wouldn't have the third. And then you'd have like, newspaper comics. And so I was really exposed to like Peanuts and Garfield and Calvin and Hobbes. And so I had a great appreciation for those sorts of like short form stories. And that is something that I really always wanted to do. And until I, met Lia, I didn't have an artist that I thought could do it well. But her style is I think, so well suited to this that it was kind of the golden opportunity, not only because I was married to her, but because it would allow us to sort of collaborate on something together that was sort of fun and fulfilling.
That's really cool. And also tell me about the designs, Leah. I love how like you have the separate, like the light bill and the dark bill for the two ducks too. It's so cute.
Mm.
Right. So at first, when we designed this character, Dan and Dave, we didn't have this specific image.
Mm.
But as we do it more and more, I think the character developed. And initially, we actually did it with the digital. And I don't think this character came out the way I wanted.
Mm.
And so I would say first 10 straight, it was digital. And I decided to just redo the whole thing. And that's when the character actually came out. And because I think I'm more comfortable with doing things in analog, and I think a lot more things comes out of me when I actually grab a pen and ink. So
There's an interesting kind of magic that took place. Like in the digital comics, they were fun and they kind of conveyed a sort of simple idea. But when she started putting pen to paper and inking things, it really just sort of opened up the sort of design doors. And that's when you started getting these really interesting elements. And like the distinctions between Dan and Dave kind of came from like, we wanted them to be like, two friends, something simple.
right.
And
But
we
very
wanted them,
recognizably
yes,
different.
distinctly different to their personalities. So like Dan is very much a romantic. And so he's kind of got this black bill and, black feathers and,
Mhm.
He's fairly put together in
Right.
appearance.
Kind of like a English
Yeah, like an English
English
gentleman almost.
gentleman who's wearing like a bow tie, like a
Yeah,
black bow tie.
and
Hmm.
Dave is rambunctious and he's always getting into trouble. He's always got a plan for how to get them out of trouble, and his plans rarely go well.
And so his hair is always like
Yeah,
ruffled up.
he's disheveled,
Hmm.
and it kind of matches his personality of being fairly blunt and just kind of trying things and being okay with failure.
Right. I love that odd couple dynamic and basically a put together and then disheveled. I love that. That's so
Yeah,
great too. So
and
tell me about, no, go ahead.
sorry, I also like to think of Dan as like the person who poses the question, and Dave is the scientist who explores the answer. And so it's like he's always like Dan very dignified, asked like, can a swan and a duck be together? And then Dave goes through the exploration of why that can't happen or why it's not like a likely thing. And then, in his adventures, he's always getting like roughed up or, he's the one who gets kicked during.
That's too funny. Oh gosh, I love that. I'd love to hear a little bit about your creative process. So do you write them first, Nathaniel, and then you draw them, Leah, or how does that work when you actually create these comics?
Yeah, so
So
go ahead.
he would some strip, like he would write a strip and then put it on my desk, and then I'll look at it. And sometimes I have requests to change something, but like most of the time I'll be like, okay, I'll do that. But like, just little part, like because like I'm type of artist, like I have to plan everything out first and then go into it. So like I would read the whole strip, and then if certain thing doesn't work for what I want to do, like I would request that. But if there's nothing, I would like go ahead and do a sketch with my do like a little sketch on my notebook, and then move that to my actual drawing paper and lay things out. And before I go ahead and ink it, I would have a meeting with him and just like spell check and just like check the whole thing, because like he would want certain vibe as well for the book. So
Yeah, it's kind of a
yeah.
collaborative process. So like I'll write a traditional comic script for each story, and then Leah interprets that obviously. And kind of my role is, I think, just to oversee what my vision is for the strip and have a dialogue about what we think should be here. But then like as an artist, she has so much, like my descriptions can be sort of simple or a little bit more descriptive depending upon what I'm sort of imagining. But like the writing process is just sitting there and thinking, what kind of adventures can I get these guys into? And then I'll come up with ideas, and then she'll kind of decide what order she wants to work on them. And then throughout her illustrative process, we'll have conversations about things, but she really has mostly a lot of creative freedom to make design choices, to change or reorient paneling choices. And, if she wants to combine two panels because it works better narratively, then she kind of has that freedom. And it's sort of, you know, I think it's the combination of the idea of the two minds that creates a sort of aesthetically and enjoyable little like story.
And I think we inspire each other. Like when he brings in some story, then that is inspire me to create something, and like in like visually. And then sometimes when I make something visually, he would want to add something to it.
And then she'll also come up sometimes with an idea that is
Right.
just a really fun idea. And then I'll have to, and then I acknowledge, obviously, that's a
Right.
great idea. How can I add some dialogue to this and enhance that idea, so that when she starts illustrating it, we have like a good joke or a good punchline or
Which
something from that.
which I'm taking advantage of him, because like I have this great idea, but I think I'm not really a great writer. So I can just like have this like idea like written down like few words, and then like, hey, can you make this in a good story for me? And then he'll do that for me. So I think that's really good advantage for me to have him as a writer.
Yeah. Yep.
That's really cool. You're a great creative team, like collaboration and all that great stuff. That's wonderful. So how long does like one strip typically take?
So
Depends on
like your typical like daily strip could take just like a day and a half, depending upon how complicated it is. Like Sunday strips will take a little bit longer because I think they're illustrated on like 11 by 17 paper when it's a Sunday strip. So it's like a lot of And you have to draw every single box. You
Right.
have to like
Mhm.
it's a lot of work
Yeah.
for her to kind of plan it out. And so those generally take a little bit
Right.
longer.
I think it all depends on the story and then what kind of detail I want to put in. And sometimes I would do multiple strip, like I would sketch out multiple strips and then go ink it like multiple strips. Like it's not always I would do one strip and then move on to the next one. So yeah, I think my work style is kind of like depend on my mood. I would ink it or sketch it.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
these days I try to do like one strip a day.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's we have so many Sunday strips and we're trying to develop more daily strips.
Right.
So we have
Uh-huh.
kind of a balanced collection
Right.
of things
Mhm.
because each one poses its own challenges. Like daily strips, like you have like just maybe like 1 to 4 panels and you have to tell a complete story in those 4 panels or less. And it has to make sense and be aesthetically pleasing. And so that the challenge there is when you ask someone for less, sometimes it can be more difficult to come up with a really clever result. But when you have unlimited space and you have unlimited time, you can that also has its benefits to like making something and experimenting longer, and you'll come up with things that like, or you can make design choices that would take a lot more time to come to fruition. So each one is like it's a constantly challenging medium because of its limitations. And I think the limitations are also what yield some of its success.
That's true because you're finding creative ways like using the panels and yeah, experimenting with different things, right? Yeah, that's
Mhm.
really cool. So you guys published this, you have your website, Nathaniel, that you found Excavation Comics. So tell me about like that as well, like how you went about creating this website.
Yeah, so I think again, it's kind of like art. Art is a very sort of the like when you're a new voice in the world of art or writing, there's a lot of gatekeeping. There's you have to like finding agents is not easy. Finding representation, finding a publisher, all of that stuff is really difficult. And I think I kind of to a degree got a little fed up with trying to find someone else who approved of what I was doing and instead took all of the responsibility on myself to found excavation as a way of just getting my work out there the way I envision it, the way I would like to see it, made. And so it's in addition to like our collaboration on Ducks, there's other projects like Beatbox and Tune that I wrote, and I work with an artist named Matt Gaudio who illustrates that comic. And it really is excavation. The idea behind it is the sort of uncovering of great ideas and the sort of freedom to just sort of let them be what they want to be. So I in Montana where I grew up, I was searching for fossils with my father and things like that. So I think that's a little bit where that came from is my origins of where I grew up. And it sort of is now a funnel for my creative work without any sort of limitations placed on me or acceptance of the outside world. It's more just like the freedom of making stuff because you believe in it and then letting the audience find you or finding that audience that would appreciate your work.
I know that's fantastic, like getting it out there and doing it all yourself because you're right. Everything is so, everyone's trying to find their audience and like put their stuff out there. So it's just like taking that initiative and doing it yourself. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
So how many comics have you written to date, like with Dan and Dave? How many have you guys put out to date?
I think we're over 30 now. We're
Oh,
fast
cool.
approaching. Over the last year, we've done 30.
But our book is one issue book.
Yeah, I mean the book
Right.
I think contains like 20, which are mostly Sunday strips, and we have our plans are to do more collections, get syndication, so people can enjoy them on a wider basis and enjoy. We don't really have like a set number that we would like to do either. I think it's kind of we'll just keep doing them until we don't have ideas or get tired of making them. But so
Hmm.
far we've been having so much fun. I think it's easily, we're on a path to making these for quite a while.
Goal
Yeah.
is to make like a multiple issue and make it into like a big.
Yeah, we would love to
come to
do
the
like a
table
big
with.
collected works of these,
Mhm.
and over several years just keep making them and having fun and telling more of these stories. Like there's more characters we would love to introduce. We kept the first book very simple with like having Dan, Dave, and Swanee, which is the Dan's sort of romantic swan friend. And so she's just sort of lovely and humors them and that kind of thing. And I think there's like we would like to add more, like without spoiling too much, but we would like to add more of like the human element back in and sort of have that sort of dynamic between them, because that was part of what created the idea as well. And I think that it would make that sort of like little world feel much more alive. So we're definitely planning to add more to our cast of characters. And I think just it'll open doors to just telling more stories, and having more just fun experiences that are relatable to a wider range of people. I think Dan and Dave are very relatable, but we'd love to do more strips with Swanee and other characters, and you know, yeah. So it's a growing and evolving thing as we continue to make more of it, and we're just sort of excited to see where that takes these characters and the idea in general.
That's cool. Yeah, expanding the world of it. I love that. Do you have a
Yeah,
favorite one so far? Or because I imagine you love them all, of course, but like, do you have a favorite one?
I love them all
Mhm.
because they're all bits and pieces of us. Like, do you have like a favorite? They're
Favorite
kind of like,
strip?
yeah, they're
They're
all kind
all
of our
my
Mhm.
babies.
babies.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, yeah, I understand. Yeah.
I think if there's like a sequence that I really
Mm.
enjoy, it's the one where Dan is asking Dave why swans and ducks can't be together. And then
I
it's because they speak different languages.
Mm.
Ducks quack, swans honk. And so he's like, well, I better take a class on honking then. And so I think it's like that sort of like sequence in the book of like him coming to this realization, wanting to overcome it, and then the sort of comedy that ensues. And I think one of the fun things about like doing comics this way also is in the book, if you pick it up and you read it, and there are each strip lives by itself. So you could have one strip and it tells a whole story, a whole has its own punchline. But then there's like a series of 3 or 4 strips, and all of those strips have a sort of longer narrative that sort of leads into each other. If you read them out of order, you could still enjoy all of them. But if you didn't read them in order, and if you read them sequentially, it would also tell a really lovely story between them. So that's kind of what we're experimenting to, which hasn't been done too much with newspaper comics, but it's been done before, but it's not something that like I think is, or at least that's something I'd like to experiment more with these characters, is like having one strip that's multiple panels, but then having 4 strips that are also, a simple and fun story.
And I think I really like the part when Dan and Dave were like traveling to countryside.
Mm.
That I think brought different. I don't know. When I was illustrating, it was very fun, like making them experiencing something new.
Mm. Yeah, because I think ducks are a really great idea because they migrate, so they can
Mhm.
go just about anywhere. And I think within that, you can also have a lot of fun. Like they can meet ducks from other countries and other species of ducks and have different adventures based on where they are. Or, they get caught in gale force winds and get blown to another continent. So
And
it's like,
yeah, and we talked about at some point we would like to have some comics, them going to Korea or them going to different country.
yeah,
So
having sort of
mhm,
themed collections too would be really fun, like doing a book of ducks in Korea, or ducks
Mm.
in Montana where we're
mhm.
from, and bringing sort of a sort of like turning the lens on these different cultures, and sort of illustrating and writing about the sort of fun differences in these cultures, and watching Dan and Dave navigate those differences.
That's really cool, taking them all over. Yeah, that's really exciting.
Yeah.
Wow. And I like what you were saying earlier, the idea of like they could be standalone strips, but then like keeping in mind like an overarching story. I do find that really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of
Yep.
like their daily adventures, but then like an ongoing, whatever that may be, them traveling around the world. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
That's nice. I know you guys have like cool merchandise too. So like when I met you guys, you had like your tote bags and like sticker, really cute stuff. Do you plan on maybe perhaps doing like Dan and Dave plushies? That could be something, you
Oh,
know?
I've definitely thought about Dan and Dave,
Mm,
stuffed animals or
yeah.
plushies. They
Mhm.
like like I grew up with like a Curious George stuffed
Oh,
animal. Like that was my thing. Like, and I've still got it. It's back in Montana at my parents' house, and he's still, hanging in there.
I
And
met
he's
him.
and so it's
Oh,
like I think they're just really like they're so lovable. It's almost like you have to kind of do something with them like
Mm,
that at some point. So I
mhm.
think as we grow and more people, start to learn about the book and, interact with it, we'd love to like make more, really special little things that, people can interact with
Right.
alongside the
Mhm.
stories.
We have a lot of merchandise idea, and
nice.
we're very excited every time we make something new. We're just like, oh, another collections.
Yeah. It's like the art just makes like really nice additional like things to help fund the project.
Mhm.
And
Mm,
so when people like the book or like, like the art style, they can, they don't even, it's kind of funny because like sometimes like people will really identify with a piece of art or
mm,
like one strip. Like we had a girl who was a biologist, and there's a biological joke with Dan and Dave, and she ended up like buying a print of one of the strips because she really connected not with like the overarching everything about the
mm.
idea, but with something with that specifically because it sort of touched something within her and what she does for the environment and for ducks in general and how she works with them. So it's
Oh,
kind of a fun idea because it really does sort of attract a bunch of different people with different backgrounds to individual or multiple strips. And yeah, it's kind of fun. So making stuff in addition to that is really interesting because like as you said, like the stickers have been really popular
Mhm.
because I think Dan and Dave are just sort of, I've got them on my laptop
And our cup.
and our
I
cup.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're just sort of happy and just fun little
Yeah.
guys. And so when you see them on something, it just sort of brightens your day a little bit, I think, especially for me. So yeah, my favorite thing is walking over and peeking at like what she's working on to see how things are coming along, and I love to see what kind of ideas she's coming up with because she has like this sort of very fantastic imagination for their expressions and physicality. So it all of those things kind of lend themselves to making fun merchandise.
Mm. Yep.
Nice. Yeah. And that's really cool. Connecting with different people. I know because you guys have been to like several fan conventions too, like selling your book. Like what other ones have you been? Because I met you guys, of course, at Pasadena Comic Con. So what other ones have you been to?
Our very first one was LA Times Festival Books.
Oh,
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So
Um,
last year we went to the LA Times Festival of Books, and they actually were like the video crew was going around and they videoed just like a little bit of Leah's artwork.
right.
And
Back then, actually, we didn't have a book, so we were selling
yeah, we were selling strips to help generate
like the
revenue,
prints.
hmm.
Yeah.
so that we could do a print run of our collection. And
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
but now we did the LA Times Festival of Books, and then we did
Boston Comic Con
Boston Comic Con,
and
and we did
Long Beach
Long
Comic
Beach Comic
Con,
Con, Pasadena Comic Con,
LA Comic Con.
LA Comic Con, which was really great because we got featured at LA Comic Con
Right.
as a
Mhm.
creator. And then this year, at the end of the month, we're going to Emerald City Comic Con, and then we'll be back at the LA Times Festival of Books in April,
Mhm.
which we're really, really excited about because now we actually have a book to
Yeah.
sell at the
Mhm.
event.
That's really exciting. Yeah. Oh gosh. I know. So what do you find? Do you find like there's like I guess it's all different kinds of people. Do you see like kids love it, adults? Like what do you like usually see when people come up and say like, oh, this is so cool?
What's interesting is it actually drags all different age group,
Mhm.
and like I think older people connect with it because they grew up with it,
Yeah,
and
it's
they
nostalgic.
yeah, they would read
Mhm.
this kind of newspaper style comic, like old school comic on the newspaper, and so they would come up to us, and then little kids are interested in it as well. And so seeing the audience, different group of audience, like having interest in it is very satisfying because I intentionally make this comic not just for the kids, but for all the age group. So,
Yeah, it's kind
uh,
of fun because like some of the themes are like adult questions, but kids are engaging with them too. And they're relating with the pictures and the imagery, and even the imagery is telling its own story. So it's been kind of funny watching people just sort of universally accept and come over and be curious about it and engage with it. And we had like one kid who came over to us at Pasadena Comic Con, and he just sort of read the whole book at our booth, and it
Oh.
was like really fun to watch him like giggle and engage and sort of enjoy the individual stories.
yeah. And one of the older gentlemen in LA Comic Con said something that I was like, yes, that was what I was intended. Was like, he said, I like your dog's comics because it's very cute, but it's not cutesy. So because I wanted to make it cute, so people can relate, but at the same time, I didn't want it to be like too childish or
Yeah, we didn't want
um
anyone to have a reason to just put it down and dismiss it. We
mhm,
wanted it to be something where, regardless of age or gender, you can just enjoy and appreciate it. And
right. Mhm,
I think, or at least our hope is that we're being successful in that endeavor.
mhm. Yeah.
Oh
Mm,
yeah, definitely. And would you say actually now ducks are your favorite animals too, or no?
That's
I keep telling her probably once a week, I tell her I really want a dog.
Oh.
yeah.
I think ducks are like, it's funny because like ducks are
Mm,
not great pets because they like go to the bathroom very often, but they make great garden pets because I think they poop like
uh,
every 15 minutes. So like they're
Yeah.
not a good household pet,
Mm.
but like in a garden, like they're like wonderful because they fertilize everything and they're
Oh.
very friendly animals
well,
for the
but
most part.
living in LA, I think I never really thought like dogs are cute because I don't see them around that often.
Mm.
But I think seeing them in person in England helped me like discover like, oh my God, they're cute, you know?
Yeah. It was I think the close exposure of them, and like geese can be a little bit mean because like when I was growing up early on, like when I was little, my brother would be bothering the geese, and they're pretty aggressive. Like you can't really approach a goose like you can a duck, and because geese, and they'll run up to you and they'll bite you and they'll smack you with their wings, and they're not very friendly. They're very, very protective of each other. But ducks in England and geese and everything, and the swans there, they were very easygoing. And I think it's just because they're so close to people and used to each other, they kind of have to get along to sort of cohabitate in these parks. But here they're very wild mostly.
Yeah, I definitely want to have some of them around my house.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've always loved ducks because of growing up in Montana and watching them and engaging with them. But I don't know if I'd say they're my favorite animal, but they're definitely a very lovely animal to
Right.
watch. And they're sort of calming to see them just sort of do their thing in a pond, or that kind of thing.
You're right. Yeah, that ducks are friendly, but not geese. I guess they like or just see things as a threat. I wonder why that is. That's interesting. I guess their like instinct is to like attack and protect, whatever that may be.
It could also possibly, I'm no biologist, but it could
Mm.
have something to do with the fact that they are quite big. And so they're a little less intimidated
True.
by us.
They're like, yeah, that's interesting though. That's funny. It's funny because you know what? As a kid, I always wanted a baby chick as a pet, and I didn't understand that they grow up to be chickens. Like I was just like, I wanted a baby chick, like a
Yeah,
scam.
if only it would stay a chick forever, right?
Exactly. That's too funny. Oh gosh. But so also in terms of your actual book that you guys got published, I understand you got it published here in the US, like got it printed in the US. That's really cool. So I'd love
Uh-huh.
to hear a little bit about that process.
Yeah. So we do, I think for like the printing of the book, it was
Mhm.
for me, it was kind of important to try and make as many of our things here as possible. So like all of our prints we do ourselves so that we can kind of control the quality and what papers we use. And there's been like the book market, it's become a pretty regular occurrence to print overseas. And I wanted to do, there's a few reasons for like printing in the US, but one of them is like the turnaround times are quite fast. And so for a small indie company like ourselves, finding a really good print company to make the books here is really advantageous to us because if we sell out, we can get more books just within a couple weeks versus several months. And then obviously like the design of the book was each book is kind of different and I tried to use some of Lia's art to kind of try and make a nice design for the book itself. But when you mean like when you mean like the printing of the books, like the process is kind of once we've decided on a printer, it's more they kind of decide they kind of take the reins, but we ultimately just kind of pick what we want it to look like and what kind of paper we want it printed on and that kind of thing. So most of it's kind of just you just have to learn some basic stuff and there's really good tutorials online for everything now. So like how to format a book for printing is like I think like those things were really daunting the first time I printed a book. And then the second time and the third time they became less daunting. Although doing a hardcover book is definitely a little bit more challenging than, a single issue type comic book. Because you have to account for spines and things like that. It gets a little more technical and a little less fun to talk about and a little bit more stressful. But I think once you figure it out, life gets easier the second time.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. No, I find that interesting though. That's really cool. So you said like your goal with is just like kind of keep expanding with these ducks. That's really cool in terms of like future projects. And so your goal is to have like you said multiple books and everything and to have like a collection eventually.
Yeah, yeah,
Really
we'd love to
nice.
keep making them, and as long as people engage with them and like them and support the project, then we'll keep making them. Yeah.
What would you say are like the biggest themes overall with Dan and Dave? Like, would you say it's like friendship, exploration? Like, what is like your thoughts on that?
What is the biggest themes? It really is kind of slice of life, at least for me. And the reason I kind of put it under slice of life is because it kind of encompasses a lot of those things. Like the elements I think of what make a sort of fulfilling and productive life are friendship, love, goals, taking risks, going on adventures, just trying to engage with your world. And I think that's what Dan and Dave do really well is their sort of natural curiosity and willingness to participate in life is what is sort of the main thing is not every day is a good day for Dan and Dave, but they definitely kind of roll with the punches and we kind of get to have a laugh at their expense because I think nowadays life is pretty difficult for a lot of people and so the goal I think is to have something that is fun and relatable and stress relieving rather than stress inducing as a sort of concept and an execution for a project. And I think it's kind of been that for us too. Because when I read through them, it's sort of fun to kind of relive after the creative process is done and just sort of experience and enjoy what it is.
Yeah. And it kind of we meant to make this not to read it just once. And second time you read, you feel something different. Third time you read, you find something different in the illustration or in the
Yeah.
writing. So
Yeah.
yeah, kind of like a timeless piece that you can enjoy.
Yeah, I think that's the hope is that the rereading is there.
Yeah. And it's also, you know, about like observation that like our life observation, because a lot of these idea comes from our experience in life. So
Hmm. Yeah.
That's really beautiful. I know the relatability and just taking inspiration from everyday life. That's wonderful. It's been such an absolute pleasure chatting with you guys. I can't thank you enough. So as we're wrapping up, I'd love to end my interviews by asking for any advice. So this could be life advice, career advice. So Leah, I'd like to start with you. Do you have any advice specifically for artists? Anything you'd like to share?
um for artists, I don't know if it will apply to everyone, but I feel like nowadays a lot of people do digital drawing. If you're like, if you can't really come up with the idea, I think you can start from analog drawing and then bring that into the digital, because that's what I experienced. Like I was kind of stuck, like when I was trying to do everything digitally. So yeah, for artists, I think that's my advice.
I think my biggest piece of advice is if you feel like you don't have an artistic voice or you don't have a community, is to go out and try and find your own. I think
Mm,
the biggest struggle for me or as a writer was that I didn't have people to read my work. You know, as creative people, we have to like we make it for ourselves first, that it's fulfilling for us, but the that's a two part, that's one half of a whole. You know, making it is fulfilling, but sharing it and it connecting with someone is what makes it, I think, feel very sort of holistically fulfilling. And what I would offer is if you believe in an idea, find a way to make it and make it well, and go find people who are willing to read it. And you just kind of have to hit the ground running with that kind of stuff. And that's what I sort of was learning throughout the process of developing excavation and the process of developing these ideas is you just kind of got to get out there and meet people, interact and engage with, you know, the world.
Definitely agreed. Absolutely. So please share where everyone can find Dan and Dave and any your social media, anything else you guys want to promote.
Yeah,
wait,
Ducks
yeah.
Comics. So we obviously excavationcomics.com will kind of take you to everything that we're doing.
And we have a Docs Instagram page, which is called Docs Comics. Yeah.
Hmm. And then that's where all of the sort of we post like daily strips there,
Mhm.
Leah drawing parts of the strips, and
Right.
yeah, it's really
Sort of the
it's kind of,
behind the scene.
yeah, it's a kind of fun little way to sort of get a back sort of behind the scenes look into what we're doing.
Oh, very cool. I always love learning about the process and people's creative process. So yeah, it's really cool. You share that too. That's really awesome.
Thank you.
It's such a pleasure chatting with both of you and like learning more about like your work and just how you two met and everything, and like about all these ducks. Very cute, very, very sweet. And I love the universality of it, honestly, that people can connect with it of all ages, as you guys said. So that's really beautiful too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been a real pleasure to talk
Right.
about it. This is our
Thank
first interview talking about ducks specifically. So
right.
we're happy to
It
be.
was my first interview about dogs, so I got kind of nervous. So
No, you were great. Oh, it was great. Yeah,
I
no, absolutely. Wonderful.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. And with that, that's going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. Be sure to visit storytellingsaga.com. And as always, feel free to send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by emailing me at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Until next time, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.